Hello, and we are back again with Richard Bailey, the ubiquitous Giles Edwards, and so forth, and to talk about Howler, uh, Richard's latest movie, which is available on Amazon Prime at this time. Any word on any future places it might stream?
It will. In February, it'll be on Plex, which is terrific news for all of us who made it because there are some, overseas possibilities that come with Plex. And it's on right now, Fandango at home. That's pretty cool. And soon to come, I think later in February, to Tubi, Fossum, Hoopla. So if you've got a library card, you can watch it. And then I think Roku might be in the mix for a little bit later on.
Excellent. Um, So I guess Giles, I've seen the film, but you wrote it up. So would you like
I
to try describing the plot as best you can?
I will do the best that I can, starting with my brief remark in the plot section of the review that was posted earlier today as we record. A grizzly hunter threatens the woods as Lenny, an attuned poet, prepares to accept a life-changing award. This is a bit ambiguous on my part, but then again, I think it reflects as accurately as one might sum up in a single sentence just what Howler is doing, which having, I guess, now seen your three latest movies, because there was King Judith, there was the Dark Sisters,
Yeah.
um, and now Howler that have landed in front of me. There's a thing that you at least tend to be doing for at least these three movies, in that you're less interested in plot than many filmmakers and more in exploration of ideas and expressing ideas.
Yeah, I think, cinema mimics dreams really well, and so I try to lean into that. And I do enjoy tightly scripted content, maybe a detective story that's, like watchmaking and things like that. And I do appreciate content like that. For me, it's a pragmatic answer, and it's also an answer that speaks toward my imagination. The pragmatic end first is that well, these are DIY affairs. These movies are, and there's the resources I have with the actors is probably my best resource. They're absolutely marvelous. But to do something that's strictly plotted, that really relies on, one scene following the next with some real continuity is difficult to do unless you have some time, to make these movies and to do multiple takes and such to really make them, cohere in a pretty serious way. So we kind of lean into the DIY aspect, which doesn't allow us a whole lot of time, for different scenes and for setups. But also something that I just enjoy about cinema is how it works as a dream. There's enough connective tissue, I hope, in the movies that I make that gives some sense of a through line, some hopefully some sense of inevitability. That by the time that one gets to the end of the movie, it's like, okay, I don't have, these pulse points that necessarily, I can point to like, or one-to-one correlatives between, a scene or an utterance and an exact meaning. But there is, hopefully a sense of like with dreams, it's like, yes, there's enough information there and enough, hopefully, delight, at the end of it that one feels like one's had an experience. And so I keep the running times of these movies pretty short. I know that there is an expectation, toward longer content to have it, the something that arrives at a summation. So I do keep the audience's interest in my interest while making them. But I think that I'm always and forever interested in what, as I said before, what cinema can do as a dream. Watching Fellini movies, David Lynch movies, of course. Well, we were talking about Albert Burney a moment ago. I think to the extent there of what that filmmaker is doing. And I think there's not a lot of it. When I talk with other filmmakers, whether emerging or established, who are doing DIY type of work, there is this idea toward recreating, in a sense, some of their favorite movies or some of their favorite movie moments, giving their own spin on it. And I think that for me, there's just something really more freeing and more enjoyable, and hopefully for the actors too, to wander into new territory, sometimes new psychic territory, by having characters who aren't necessarily married to the tools of their job that they do. Like they're not police officers. Well, there are some police officers in my movies, but they're not beholden to a procedural thing with that. They kind of limit that. Their imaginative life comes into it. And so, yeah, that's the way we do these things. It comes, from a pragmatic point of view. It's like, well, I have only such resources at my disposal. These scenes have to join together in a particular sort of way. I've got an interior that's available to me, a section of exterior that's available to me. How do they narratively mesh? Well, we'll we'll bring in, some thoughtfulness and some discourse and maybe some dreamy elements to help aid that.
Yeah. It's actually another, you're talking about DIY contemporaries, make me think of Joe Badon, who also has, shall we say, a dreamlike thing that I believe he's trying to pursue. However, his is, I'll just say, and I mean this no disrespect to either of you, a much more highly caffeinated dream than,
Yeah.
one of your movies is, where it's sort of, more of a feeling your way forward as opposed to, crashing through a series of, odd encounters and the like there. So you mentioned, yeah, resources are the people. I was kind of curious, and I probably have asked this before, but like assembling a cast for this, because as you say, this is DIY. This is neither big bucks nor in any fair likelihood major exposure for these individuals, but you have some interesting people assembled that give interesting performances. I was just wondering what well you perhaps draw from in for Howler, say, in particular.
Yeah, well, I enjoy saying this because it is true that I'm the beneficiary of some terrific performances, throughout these movies, and I'm finally able to work with theatrical actors in the North Texas area, who are regularly doing, some meaningful plays, experimental plays, directing
Mhm.
their own plays and such. So there's, presumably, fulfillment, in their lives with the acting that they get to do. On audiences for audiences, night after night, during the run of a play, or a few plays during the course of a year. So that I think is their ultimate fulfillment, as artists. They're doing that on a daily basis, and I think that they lend their talents to me. Because I've been watching these folks on stage. I'm an avid live theater goer. I think it's a great artistic source. There's you're watching with public anything, there's that sense of anything can happen, in live theater, and there's just something really pleasant about that. It's a great evening out. And so I've watched them, I've seen them perform in a variety of different ways, and so it's not difficult then, for me, or hasn't been difficult so far, to imagine a character, some utterances, some a run of dialogue that they might immediately sort of twig to or think, oh, this is interesting, I'd like to go with that. And so that's really it. I've just over time have developed a rapport with live theater actors, and when I approach them with these movies, they've been extraordinarily hospitable to me. In most cases, by saying yes, and then I'm very careful with their time and how we schedule these things, and so their commitment is. Obviously, there's a lot of lines in these movies to memorize and to be in these places, but I try to make it as unobtrusive as possible. And yeah, I'm just so grateful that they come into it. And that's the way, that's the move. I try to do a movie a year. That's the way it's working out. Howler is out now. I'm finishing up one to for later this year called Dreadnought, and then later this year we shoot another one called right now called Pagan Phase, which is an interesting sort of title. We'll see if that one sticks. And so to do a movie a year with people who, like I say, I mean, have some artistic fulfillment in their lives, who are comfortable with large tracts of dialogue and like the way that these movies look. That's a big part of it too. You're not going to get them to come around unless the movie looks terrific. And so on the technical end, it's just two of us on the crew, but we've got some experience, in cameras and editing and putting together the sound and stuff that we feel like we can accommodate them pretty well with a good visual package as well.
So yeah, mentioning the actors and the sources. Yeah, I guess it might do well to clarify a little bit what's going on here. There is this main character is Lenny. She is pretty much seems a lifelong poet for the longest time. Just shared it, at home with her son. She at some point found a up and coming publisher who was happy to bring her vision to whatever I presume at the time niche audience. And looming over Lenny in a exciting but also vaguely disturbing for her kind of way is this big award that I don't really have my fingers on the pulse of the poetry scene, so I'm not sure what you may or may not be referring to vis-a-vis, what kind of awards are life-changing for a poet. But this is about to happen to her, so it's going to help Lenny. It's going to help her publisher Charlotte, and certainly the somewhat put upon son was a character I quite liked. I believe Gordon, I believe his
Yeah.
name was. And I noticed there was, for me, an interesting development in the start is where we have poet Lenny. We have her two friends who are sort of latter-day hippie wordsmith types who somehow live in the forest, live in or around the forest. It's never really explained how that works out for them. And they're acting in one particular way, and then grounded in a much more traditional, shall we say, for the screen kind of acting is character Gordon, who is like, okay, this person is acting like I expect shall we say, a person to be behaving in this context, and also Charlotte, the publisher. So we have this mix of characters who are on the spectrum of uh, life as life and life as performance art. And so there's a range of behaviors that I don't often see because normally I see either closer to the ham or closer to the staid kind of action on there. And of course, living in the background is a father and son woods people, one of whom is going around putting traps everywhere. So there is, with a cast of 6 to 8, there is a lot of, there's a broad range of behavior
Yeah.
that we see. And of course, there's that disillusioned poet character as well, who is somehow straddling between normal and elevated characteristic there. So I've seen King Judith. That's your take on the police procedural. I have seen The Dark Sisters. That's your take on, we'll say, philosophical slasher. You are, by and large, consider yourself a poet. So what brought you to finally talk about what you do and are trying to do explicitly as opposed to through a layer of remove narratively?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate everything you said and in the review, about the plot and how it works. And for me, in doing a movie a year, I do get the opportunity, to you know, obviously make a movie that is hopefully appealing to people, that has good in production values and interesting performances and interesting characters for the actors to perform. But also you get to, not in a way that I hope approaches preaching or professing any sort of idea, but I also get to express a little bit about what's on my mind. And it seems like a ghost story or any sort of a movie that's got a haunted uh, element to it, things that fall away. And I think all of the characters are talking about that. Things that fall away. The publishing character, Jenny Liddell, who's been with us on a couple of movies now, and she's worried about everything that she's sacrificed, or she doesn't see it that way, but everything that she's put on hold to make this small publishing press, the small press work, with Laney the Poet, and everybody's got some pretty serious skin in the game, toward art and culture, and these things are, they believe, and I suppose my thinking is that art, matters of culture, are not an indulgence, at all. I mean, they are essential. I think it's Sally Mann, the photographer, has a new memoir out, and she puts it, I think, in a really interesting way. This idea of fulfilling your dreams, if you're going to be an artist, and she doesn't like it that way. There's something infantilizing about that. We're not trying to live up to our dream, some idea of fame or some idea of being a filmmaker, of any sort of renown. It's just really a matter of following the signals, from whatever that antenna is that gives you your ideas and the stuff that makes you feel. And for me, what was making me feel is the stuff that was falling away. A lot of small presses, some people who I'd known, passing away. You wonder about those things like legacy. I have a tremendous interest in outsider art, underground sources of publication and things. And there's something fantastic when those folks are alive and putting that work out in the world. And then you sort of wonder, about what it might all mean, or how we preserve the aptness of some of those ideas, once those people are gone. And so the one poet, there at the end who's talking with Linda, brings these things up, and it's all spoken, like a ghost story. Everyone's kind of between two worlds. One world is falling away, their stuff of ambition, what they connect their ideas to, printed words, and another is emerging. Another world is emerging, and that's the future, and the future that we all face, one that is without us, and our individual initiatives, and what that might be like. I don't, unless I miss my guess, none of us can help but think about that just a little bit. And if you're me, a dramatist above anything else, you look for ways of dramatizing that sort of thing, and that's what I try to do year after year.
Interesting. You did so. I kind of thought that there were two, and this is just me. I probably there are more, but there are two sort of thematic streams that I noticed, and we just talked about one, which is the poetry and the vocation of the poet, which gets discussed rather explicitly at one point. The other kind of theme that I noticed that I wanted to see if you could expand upon is the concept of nature and our relationship to nature, because there's a lot of nature in this. There is, I think, the sort of most villainous character is a person who transgresses sort of the natural order of the way humans are supposed to interact with nature by creating these cruel traps that his father's trying to teach him how to hunt properly and traditionally so that he is in concert with nature. But do you agree that that was a major theme that you were trying to explore in this as well?
Oh, definitely, definitely. I'm always wrestling with that. I had the fun opportunity recently to talk with some folks about the Bigfoot legend, and there's some folks who are really wanting to put some scientific accuracy on Bigfoot sightings and such. And my feeling about Bigfoot or Wendigo or any of the indigenous spirit, stories about this giant in the woods. It's like Bigfoot is typically seen, or the Wendigo is typically seen by either hunters or explorers, and presents this idea of the hunter being hunted or the explorer being explored. I think it all speaks to some spiritual fear we have when we're in nature of being sized up, measured, and maybe not, reaching up to that measure, perhaps even drug off and eaten. It's really easy for us to see the natural world as a background. I think it's harder and harder for us to see ourselves as part of this ecology. We're part of all of it. We're being looked at, and some of it too is in William Burroughs' idea in Naked Lunch, and the way that he described coming up with the title Naked Lunch, as that frozen moment one realizes what's on the edge of one's fork, that we can't be human without trespassing, in the world. And I think that uneasy sensibility just sort of happens when we're in the woods. We can't see the horizon, even though our eyes are doing a good job of adjusting to the light, the way that the sunlight falls through the trees, sort of in patches, so this sort of strobing effect as we move. I think on a subliminal level, it affects us. And I think it gives rise to stories, like Bigfoot. And this is my Bigfoot story, that hunter in the woods. And this is the third movie, where the one that I'm working on now will be the third, where we have this mysterious hunter character who seems to be that spiritual measuring influence, where we look at nature and we're not quite sure what's looking back at us. But we know it's probably going to be to our tremendous disadvantage if we look away, turn our back on, or try to ignore.
Excellent. So actually, just briefly, since you mentioned the stroboscopic effect, there is one of I think my favorite image in the film is what Giles describes as a triptych. There's three frames, and they're shots of leaves and trees, and they're each moving in a slightly different way, and one's going through,
Yeah.
and you get that stroboscopic effect. It's a very beautiful uh, image, and it's neat the way it's divided into three parts that are all connected but look different. I wish we had that image, but I don't have that image to
But
share.
if we ask the filmmaker nicely, they might be able to drum that up for us.
We do have these three images that I was able to grab to give people an idea of the
Yeah.
look of the film. I guess this is the main actor in the film, right?
Rhonda Boutte, yeah, who plays Lenny, and she's terrific. And a lot of the movie was born just by, again, having watched her on stage, she does a lot of experimental theater, and the way that she speaks some remarkable ideas on the stage for a live audience, and you just track right along with her, or that was my experience watching her. Everyone's there. I tried to recreate, in the movie. She just has a way of speaking, and a way of fully investing herself, in those words that I thought was just, I've always just been amazed by. She just has that ability that it never seems like someone trying to deliver magical thinking, but rather someone who is, speaking spontaneously, someone who is discovering and trying to describe the images as fast as they're coming to her in her mind. And she was tremendously helpful to us in King Judith, and I really wanted to work with her again and develop this larger role. And she didn't bat an eye at it. It was wonderful. And when she does finally deliver her vision at the end, it was just a couple of takes. We just ran the camera all the way through. And I think with any of these actors, you can just run the camera on the scene, and let them do it, and let those discoveries, or perhaps if they find themselves lost in the text, and when they come back to it, they're just such pros, that they don't break the character, and that searching becomes a part of it too. So really describing her character is much like describing the actor. And I think that where she fits into the plot of the movie is, here's someone who is especially receptive to maybe revolutionary spiritual images, and she gives voice to those images. And that's been her track, more so than wanting it to be any sort of profession. She feels that's her duty, that's her habit of art, to do that. And when she's faced with this quandary of like, okay, well, here's the big award, which isn't attached to anything like the Pulitzer or anything, but you get the sense that it's a pretty big cash award, and it's probably going to mean her stuff is going to live in the registers for a time. She's probably, wondering, okay, well, how might I manage this? But you can't just suddenly change which fountain, is pouring for you. She has to stick, with the influence that gave her rise, and hopefully, yeah, by the end of it, people are fully with her on that vision, and following it, and just being transported by it. And so she goes through a variety of situations. There we see her once, beside a tree. She's in a vision. We had this interesting nighttime scene driving at night, where we first started getting the sense that reality and visionary aspects of the movie are sort of blending. The publisher, who is Jenny Liddell, and Rhonda, who is the poet, take this nighttime drive, long dark night of the soul, in a sense. And when they arrive at the party, they arrive, transported. The way that the language of the party unfolds is pretty unusual, I think. And the character in the upper left there, that's Braun Ash. That's the woodsman's, the dangerous woodsman's father, who tried to teach the ways of the natural world to his son, who went on more of a villainous streak. So they sort of suggest that balancing influence, the more rational view of nature, and trying to live responsibly, in an ecology, and the other, which is just about accumulation, and capture.
Okay. And I should add for some people, there are a number of sections of this film, especially transition type sections, that one would describe as trippy or psychedelic. So there's some abstract imagery and some editing stuff that will
Yeah.
appeal to the eye.
those pictures that you talked about, and I'll try to bring some up to share with you on to or at least that you can see and share however you might like to. Is that yeah, those weren't scripted. Those came in the edit, and after some thinking and then automatic thinking, you start manipulating some images and stuff, and you never quite know what's going to work. And it was just, then it was working, and then where to insert it, and then the number three, the types of images there. And it's cool where we shoot these things, I'm all over Texas, and you never know what you're going to see in nature. And uh, uh, Jay Flowers, who shoots these movies with me, we're always, accumulating images and manipulating those images. I am, in post and the stuff where you find elements of the natural world and you sort of create prismic effects with them and distortions. I like psychedelic art, not just the psychedelic pop art or what we think of, or ordinarily think of, but there's those paintings and images that really invite you to have a bit of a trance. And so hopefully, yeah, those shots don't come as intrusions, but rather invitations to just let yourself, enter the trance. I think a lot of the language of these movies, certainly The Dark Sisters, all of the language was meant to act something as a spell, or at least my imitation, or at least
Hmm.
having read spells and being a lifelong reader of macabre literature, trying to match that and trying to create, a spell. For DIY filmmakers, the saying is true: talk is cheap. You can, if you've got good actors who can say some things, you can save a lot of money, on a lot of different setups and moving your company around just by allowing them to do that, and so creating that of spell-like language is something that we try to do in each of these movies, because then the language becomes an atmosphere. And Giles, you were very generous the way that you put it. The words and the images, how they're not necessarily attached, but definitely of a piece, is something that we try to make in this. And I hope I'm not being vague. I don't mean to be purposely vague. I feel like your review hit all the plot points and what you were talking about. But I think that so much more, and it's nice to be able to speak in this way, to talk about, what are the influences, behind the movie and what we mean to each other as makers and artists and what we're reaching for, which I think is just as important, as maybe the plot points in the movie. I hope that people can see this picture and realize that here are some people who are very careful, in their thinking on these matters, and really invested in uh, a dreamy atmosphere and taking that seriously, but also seeing the humorous moments that can arise from it too.
Oh, well, you're welcome. But yeah, I was going to remark from something you said earlier about a spell, as you call yourself out about that anyway. I think maybe it was around a third way through the movie that Charlotte, I believe she's talking with Gordon about probably the two most eccentric, like overtly eccentric characters. Performed, I'd say Noel and Bert, the
Yeah.
two kind of aging happy hippie types that Charlotte remarks how their words are, yeah, not so much explaining anything, but seem ritualistic in their form and delivery there. So you're obviously, as much as there is ambiguity into what you're trying to nail down here, you're aware of it, and aren't presenting yourself as a be all end all source of knowledge. And this is what this means. As when Greg said that it was only his interpretations, we're like, well, yeah, we're all going to have our own interpretation of what's going on here, because it's the film is doing what it's doing. And
Yeah, I
so
appreciate that. Yeah, and the actors, the couple, they're magnificent. I thought they were wonderful, and they also signals to, like, there are people, who follow these sorts of signals or follow these impulses, toward the artful life, or at least toward expression, or, maybe even the outsider kind of life or another kind of life, who aren't writing things or painting things, but nevertheless are in tune, with a variety of different messages and signals or interpretations of the
mm,
world, and they're unapologetic about it. I mean, I know they probably understand that living off in the woods is probably best for them, in terms of societal understanding. And there's the suggestion that they were pretty tight-knit group of people, with Lenny, back in the day, who's probably more like them than she is, a figure of the publishing world, someone
Mhm.
who's just wants to be, recognizes the time on her planet, time on the planet, in such a way that, it's really about what you can consider the miracle of the human mind and also the terror of the human condition,
Mhm.
and maybe living is just thinking about that and weighing those things. And anything that we want to attach a commercial aspect to, in art, could be problematic.
Yes, I know. What was that? I believe Norman is the kind of
Yeah. You
jaded
know,
is a little too strong a word, but definitely a self-doubting poet fella. And yes, the remark conversation with him discussing annihilation,
yeah,
not only of the body but of the self as
yeah,
we are perceived and ultimately remembered or not.
yeah,
And the importance of that is, one of the handful of tensions that I enjoyed being played around with. Also, the whole nature versus city thing is something that all my life I've been very wary of nature advocates because I've been outside in nature. It's not very comfortable. It's been out to kill us for millennia. And yet I hear these, praises heaped on it in a way that I don't really see heaped on, what I'd call more traditional society, urban and so on. Obviously there are, fans of the big city, but it's like, humanity versus the opposition, nature, and the tension there as well is something that came to my mind when watching this movie. And I guess I kind of appreciated that. At least through your characters, you talk about a grandeur of nature, a magnificence of nature, but don't totally discount, oh, there's the city too, and at least that's okay.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, yeah, I agree, and part of that, I guess vacillating or between the experiences or the ambivalence arrives from the fact that I grew up quite remotely, on a farm. There's when you're 12 years old and responsible for, like a dozen head of cattle, and knowing that however you're feeling that way that day as an individual is how those animals' lives are going to go. Maybe I don't feel like herding everyone to where the pond is, or carrying that hay around, but it doesn't sort really matter. What you're thinking and how you motivate yourself to, I guess, be a good steward on a farm, with animals that rely on you, is an awesome responsibility, awesome in the whole sense of that word, and it was such a responsibility, and I would put a burden to it that, when I was 17, I left the farm and didn't want to return to it. I was the person. I was a person for cities. It's something I always anticipated, and yet, given the digital technology the way that it is, over the last few years, I've been able to make these movies, and they all, examine. They're all shot outdoors. For the most part. The Howler being an exception with a lot of indoor stuff, and so maybe there's a lot to analyze, about myself there. But yeah, just always thinking about these people in nature and these vast areas that and their place in it is I don't make or haven't yet made any sort of urban center movie or the lives of city dwellers, or if they are, that life, I put them in a long dark night, in the woods. And I think that's forever going to be something that I think about. And it comes back to pragmatism too. When the sun is your sole light source, well, I mean, you can do you wait for the right time of day, and you can get a lot of scenes done, should the weather be cooperating with you. And there's a lot that you can do there. But yeah, I'm always fascinated by that. I hope I appreciate what you said, and hopefully it's true. It doesn't seem like any sort of easy answers or suggesting, well, we all need to go, just live out on a few acres of land quietly, because I don't think I don't think that's the way of happiness either. I think that we've just always going to have this burden, in our minds, and it's going to invest itself in our dreams. Where are we as a species and as an individual in relationship to the natural world, which somehow seems to be reliant upon us and also utterly ambivalent to us as well. Can't help but feel that way.
If there's one I'd say concrete message from you as the filmmaker, and certainly from a number of the characters. Lenny, and I imagine others within the movie, and certainly talk other characters talking about Lenny, is the importance of forging our own path. If I were to say there's one definite message from the director, writer, yourself, there is that we are all on our own paths here, and we need to do we need to do what we must do, I guess, is maybe a seal, but certainly a quick way to describe what I think is the only concrete message I got from Howler here.
Yeah, that seems true. You got to pay attention to, the stuff that's put in front of you in terms of opportunities. We all kind of can live in that vague space around here, which is this ambitious space. And I think when you lean into, the different, you could, I think there are signposts available to us all, when we're looking at it, and maybe it doesn't match that ambitious idea we have, but I think there are directives toward the life that we're supposed to lead, or at least one that's more happiness, that's more accommodating to us, makes us better friends, better, spouses, better everything, if we just open up and pay attention. For me, I'm very fortunate. It's very as difficult as it is to make movies, somehow, by practicing this, I'm sort of the friend I want to be, and the partner I want to be. It just sort of it gives you that as difficult as it is, and there are all these hurdles. But I think in practicing filmmaking, here comes that pragmatism again. It's just sort of built into it. Those struggles and realizations, and asking yourself deep in the night, what am I doing? I'm not getting younger. Just the opposite is happening, and then you take stock of, well, this is pretty good. We got another movie coming, and this is all right. And certainly not that my way is the best way, but I am just someone who, a long time ago, thank goodness, through some crucible of experience, just stopped trying to push a desired outcome and just said, okay, well, where's the next breadcrumb? What's the thing meant for me to pick up, to look at, and to hopefully bring in like-minded people and make something interesting and have an interesting life.
Well, that's good. I think I had incorrectly put up a timer before, just learning how to use it, and now it is correct, and it's showing we have just over a minute left. So, if there are any final thoughts anybody wants to add, we have a minute. I so.
Yeah, thank you both very much for giving so much time to this discussion of the movie. And yeah, it was a real pleasure to talk about the movies that I hope everyone will see Obex. I'm sure a lot of people are going to see Dead Man and maybe make these other discoveries as well. But yeah, the time that you afforded me to talk about Howler or not talk about Howler, I'm not sure which one I did. Really appreciate it. I hope people will watch the movie and like it. And of course, always check out 366 Weird Movies. That's where the best discourse is on underground and strange movies.
Very sound advice. So yeah, thanks, Richard. It was a pleasure to chat. As director, poet, filmmaker Richard Bailey says, do visit 366 Weird Movies, subscribe to our YouTube, watch them all the way through, leave comments, buy our book, watch Richard's movie, all kinds of great bits of advice. Anything to add in the last 14, Greg?
No, of course, watch Howler and Richard's other movies on Amazon Prime, probably soon on some other venues. And we are pretty much out of time, so let's just say goodbye. Thank you for being here, Richard, and we'll probably see you again later. And
I hope so.
Yeah.
next week.